The gunshot ripped through the opulent chatter like a physical thing, shattering not just the crystal chandelier above, but the fragile illusion of safety that money and influence so carefully constructed. Maya Rivas didn't flinch. Her training, etched into her muscle memory from years of military service and countless hours on range, locked her down. Time, for her, became a liquid, stretching and distorting around the compressed second of impact. One moment, she was a silent shadow in a rented black uniform, observing the predictable ebb and flow of a high society charity gala. The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel hummed with the self-satisfied murmur of the city's elite, a symphony of clinking glasses, forced laughter, and the rustle of designer fabrics. Maya, stationed near a seldom-used service exit, was a professional wallflower. Her gaze, however, was anything but passive. It swept, analyzed, dismissed, and lingered. The slightly too long sleeves of a waiter's jacket near the kitchen entrance, a flicker of nervous energy in a guest at the champagne bar, the fixed, almost aggressive smile of a minor politician working the room, every detail was data. Her focus, honed by the constant hum of low-level anxiety that came with guarding people, was sharp. Her assignment was mundane. Perimeter security, third tier, well outside the VIP bubble currently shielding Ambassador Kenji Tanaka of Japan. The ambassador, a man of quiet gravitas and considerable diplomatic clout, was the evening's guest of honor, a focal point of U.S.-Japanese cultural exchange. His immediate protection detail, a phalanx of grim-faced Secret Service agents led by the perpetually tight-lipped Agent Thompson, formed an impenetrable circle around him. They were the tip of the spear. Maya was, at best, a part of the shaft. But then came the first sound that wasn't meant for polite conversation, a distant rising crescendo of angry shouts from outside. A protest, heavily advertised, had predictably turned volatile. The hotel's reinforced windows muffled most of it, but the tremors, both audible and visceral, seeped into the elegant room. A murmur of unease rippled through the guests. A few looked towards the grand entrance, their expressions a mix of annoyance and mild fear. Suddenly, a cacophony of breaking glass erupted from the main lobby, impossibly close. It wasn't the polite tinkle of a dropped flute. It was the violent splintering of a window, followed by the guttural roar of a crowd. Panic, a feral creature, clawed its way into the ballroom. Shouts and screams began to mix with the music. "We need to move the ambassador!" Agent Thompson's voice, usually a low growl, was sharp, cutting through the rising tide of fear. His team, trained for this, sprang into action, forming a tighter shield around Tanaka, ushering him towards a pre-designated secure exit. Their movements were precise, practiced, almost robotic. But Maya, though part of a different team, saw what they didn't. Or rather, she saw what they couldn't from their position, their focus locked on the immediate threat. Her post by the service exit offered a different, crucial vantage point. A figure, dressed in dark, nondescript clothing, burst through a side door near the kitchen, a door Maya had specifically noted for its flimsy lock. He wasn't part of the riot, not really. This was a targeted attack. His eyes, burning with a chilling, singular intent, were fixed on Ambassador Tanaka. In his hand, glinting under the emergency lights that now flickered on, was a semi-automatic pistol. He was fast. Too fast. The Secret Service agents, still executing their primary evacuation route, were a hair's breadth from intercepting him. But that hair's breadth was a lifetime in the face of a bullet. Agent Thompson, his face a mask of grim determination, was just beginning to pivot, to shout a warning, to draw his own weapon. Maya saw the gunman raise his arm, saw the barrel level, saw the ambassador, a look of profound shock and understanding dawning on his face. She knew, with an icy certainty, that Thompson's team, for all their professionalism, were one crucial, terrifying fraction of a second too late. Every instinct screamed at her to act. Her brain, processing data at light speed, mapped the trajectory, calculated the distance. Protocol be damned. Her orders were to hold her position, to report, to not engage unless explicitly authorized. But the image of that gun, that trajectory, the ambassador's suddenly vulnerable face, it was a flash of memory, a ghost of a battlefield past. Without conscious thought, she moved. A woman in a shimmering gown, her face contorted in terror, was scrambling past Maya, trying to get to the service exit. Maya shoved her, hard but without malice, out of her path. The woman stumbled, cried out, but Maya was already gone, a blur of black uniform against the chaos. She didn't have time to draw her own sidearm. Didn't have time for a perfect tackle. All she had was the precious, agonizing half-second before the trigger was pulled. Her body moved on its own. She launched herself forward, a human shield, throwing her weight, twisting, placing herself squarely between the assassin and Ambassador Tanaka. The second gunshot, a muffled thwump compared to the initial shattering blast, was different. It wasn't the sound of an external threat. It was the sound of something tearing inside her. A searing, unimaginable pain exploded in her left side, just below her ribs. It felt like being hit by a sledgehammer, simultaneously burning and freezing. Her breath hitched, a strangled gasp escaping her lips. The impact slammed her backward, her legs giving out from beneath her. She hit the marble floor hard, the world tilting violently. The gunman was tackled, a whirlwind of Secret Service agents descending on him. Thompson's enraged face swam into view, his mouth moving, but all Maya could hear was a distant roaring in her ears, a high-pitched whine. She tasted blood, coppery and warm. Her hand instinctively clutched her side, finding slick warmth. Through the haze of pain, she locked eyes with Ambassador Tanaka. He was being pulled away by his detail, but his gaze, wide with shock and a profound raw gratitude, was fixed on her. It was a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgement, before the darkness swallowed her whole. The last thing she registered was the acrid smell of gunpowder and her own coppery blood. Maya surfaced from the darkness slowly, as if swimming up through thick, murky water. The first sensation was a dull, rhythmic beeping, a metronome counting out a life she wasn't sure was still hers. The second was the smell, a sterile, chemical sharpness that scoured the inside of her nostrils, the universal scent of hospitals. The third, and most insistent, was the pain. It was no longer the sharp, explosive agony of the bullet, but a deep, foundational throb in her side, a malevolent presence that radiated heat and seemed to pulse in time with the beeping machine. She cracked her eyes open. The light was a merciless fluorescent glare. A white ceiling, acoustic tiles with faint water stains, a metal stand with a hanging IV bag dripping clear liquid into a tube that disappeared under the thin, scratchy blanket covering her. She was alive. The realization landed not with a crash of relief, but with a quiet, exhausted thud. A woman in blue scrubs bustled in, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "Ah, you're awake," she said, her voice efficient but not unkind. "Welcome back. You're at City General. You took a nasty hit, but the surgeons got the bullet out. You're going to be very sore for a while." She checked the foredrip, then took Maya's pulse, her fingers cool and professional. "You're quite the celebrity, you know." The nurse gestured with her chin toward a television mounted on the wall. The volume was low, but the images were clear. A news anchor with severe hair and a concerned expression was talking. Behind her, a graphic read, "Cheo's at the gala." Then the screen cut to a grainy still from a security camera. It was her. A blurry figure in black, mid-motion, a moment of kinetic desperation frozen in time. The chyron at the bottom of the screen was stark. "Hero guard saves diplomat. Hero." The word felt foreign, like a coat that didn't fit. She had just moved. She had done what the moment demanded. Seeing it labeled, packaged for public consumption, felt strange. Still, a faint warmth spread through her chest, momentarily pushing back against the cold dread and the physical pain. She had done the right thing. It had mattered. On the bedside table, a testament to that sentiment stood in a crystal vase. A magnificent spray of white orchids, their pristine petals a stark contrast to the drab, functional room. Tucked into the arrangement was a small, cream-colored envelope. With a pained grunt, Maya reached for it. Her side screamed in protest, a fiery reminder of the cost. The card inside was embossed with the seal of the Japanese consulate. The message, in elegant, handwritten script, was simple and formal. "With deepest gratitude and wishes for a swift recovery, your courage will not be forgotten. Ambassador Kenji Tanaka." Tears pricked at the corners of Maya's eyes. It was real. She had saved him. The pain, the chaos, it had been worth it. She clutched the card, the thick paper, a tangible anchor in the sea of morphine-laced confusion. She was a hero. For a few precious minutes, in the quiet of that hospital room, she let herself believe it. The illusion was shattered by a man who didn't knock. He entered with the quiet confidence of someone who owned the space, dressed in a tailored but unremarkable gray suit. He was not a doctor. His smile was polished, practiced, and didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Rivas? I'm Richard Davies, From hospital administration, he said, extending a hand she was too weak to take. He retracted it smoothly. On behalf of all of us at City General, I want to commend you on your bravery. It was a truly remarkable thing you did. Thank you, Maya managed, her voice a dry rasp. We're so glad you're on the mend, he continued, his tone perfectly modulated. He pulled a chair over, uninvited, and Saturday? Now, I hate to bother you with this while you're recovering, but there's just a bit of administrative business to get out of the way. The sooner we sort it, the sooner you can focus entirely on healing. He produced a tablet from his briefcase, its screen glowing to life. Business? Maya asked, a new kind of cold seeping into her veins. Just the usual, Davies said, tapping the screen with a stylus. We've been in contact with your employer, Blackwood Security Solutions. He peered at the screen. We just need to confirm a few details regarding your insurance coverage for the procedures. He said the word procedures with a clinical detachment that made her skin crawl. You had emergency exploratory surgery to remove the projectile, extensive internal repairs, 2 units of blood, not to mention the trauma care, ICU stay, and the specialist consultations with Dr. Evans, our head of surgery. He listed her injuries and their remedies as if reading a grocery list. Each word represented a new, terrifying sum of money. The warmth of heroism was rapidly evaporating, replaced by a familiar, gut-wrenching anxiety she knew from staring at maxed-out credit card bills and student loan statements. My company, they have insurance, she said, her voice small. They do, Davies affirmed, his eyes still on the tablet. A bronze-level PPO, it's a plan. It comes with a rather significant out-of-pocket maximum, of course, and a fairly high deductible, which it appears has not yet been met for the year. He used the jargon like a shield, a series of impenetrable terms designed to confuse and intimidate. And that's before we factor in coinsurance for out-of-network anesthesiologists. It can get a little complicated. Maya stared at him, the beeping of the heart monitor suddenly sounding frantic, accusatory. This man wasn't here to check on her. He was a bill collector in a suit, assessing her ability to pay before her stitches had even begun to heal. The heroism, the sacrifice to him, it was all just an event that had generated a large invoice. He saw her not as a patient, but as an account receivable. I don't understand, she stammered. My job. I got hurt on the job. They have to cover it. Of course, Davies said soothingly, the smile back in place. And we'll be working with them directly to process the claim. We just like to keep our patients informed. It's policy. He stood, placing a thick folder full of forms on her bedside table, right next to the ambassador's flowers. You just rest up. Someone from billing will be by in a day or two to walk you through the payment plan options. He gave a final, empty smile and was gone, leaving a chill in the room that the thin hospital blanket couldn't ward off. The flowers suddenly seemed mocking, a luxury item in a room that was costing thousands of dollars an hour. The card from the ambassador felt like a souvenir from another life. Her next visitors didn't bother with false pleasantries. They pushed the door open with a thud. 2 men in rumpled suits. The lead, a man with tired, cynical eyes and a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, flashed a badge. Maya Rivas? I'm Detective Miller, City Homicide. This is Detective Chen, he said, gesturing to his silent younger partner who was already taking out a notepad. Miller didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't acknowledge the IV in her arm or the pain that was surely etched on her face. He dragged the visitor's chair to the side of her bed, scraping it loudly against the floor. We need your statement about the events at the Astoria, he began, his voice flat and devoid of sympathy. Okay, Maya said, trying to push herself up on her elbows, a jolt of pain making her gasp. Your post was Sector Gamma, by the service corridor leading to the East Alley. Is that correct? Miller asked, his eyes scanning her face, looking for, what? Deception? Weakness? Yes, that's right. So, can you explain to me? He said, leaning forward slightly, his tone shifting from flat to accusatory. Why you abandoned your assigned post? The question hit her like a slap. I didn't abandon it. I saw the gunman. He was going to shoot the ambassador. The Secret Service was too far away. You thought they were too far away, Miller corrected her, his voice dripping with condescension. The Secret Service had the principal under escort. They have protocols for this, very specific protocols, practiced and drilled for hundreds of hours. Your intervention wasn't part of that protocol, was it? There was no time for protocol. He was raising his gun. You're not a federal agent, Miss Rivas. Miller said, cutting her off. "You're private security. Your job, according to your employer's contract with the hotel, is to observe and report. You did neither. Instead, you charged into an active shooter situation, creating a secondary point of chaos. Did you consider that your actions could have drawn fire towards other civilians? That you physically interfered with the federal agent's ability to neutralize the threat?" Every word was a jab, designed to dismantle her reality, to recast her heroic act as a reckless, stupid mistake. He wasn't investigating a crime. He was building a case against her competence, her judgment. He was looking for a scapegoat. "I saved his life," she whispered, the words feeling weak and hollow even to her own ears. Miller sat back, a flicker of something disdain, perhaps in his eyes. "The gunman was apprehended. The ambassador is safe. What we're trying to figure out is how the situation got so out of control in the first place. A guard leaving her post is a major security breach." He stared at her, his gaze unwavering. "Your statement is that you acted because you believed the ambassador was in immediate danger that the federal agents on site could not prevent." It sounded so different when he said it. Clinical, self-serving. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger now, a spark of defiance kindling in her gut. "That's what happened. We'll note that," Miller said dismissively. He stood up. "The feds will probably want to talk to you too. Don't go anywhere." He said the last part without a hint of irony, gesturing vaguely at her bedridden state. Then he and his partner were gone. Maya was left alone in the silence, the rhythmic beeping of the machine now sounding like a mocking laugh. The news report was a lie. The flowers were a beautiful, empty gesture. The hero's welcome was over. She had taken a bullet, and in the eyes of the very system she had served, she had done something wrong. The physical pain in her side was nothing compared to the cold, sickening dread that was now spreading through her, a poison for which there was no antidote. Her ordeal, she was beginning to realize, had only just begun. A few days passed in a morphine-laced haze, each one punctuated by the bland hospital meals, the patronizing cheerfulness of the daytime nurses, and the cold indifference of the night shift. The initial flurry of media attention had died down, the national news cycle having already moved on to the next tragedy, the next scandal. Maya's heroism was old news, a story that had been told and was now gathering dust. The magnificent orchids from the ambassador were beginning to wilt, their petals browning at the edges, a fitting metaphor for her own fading sense of accomplishment. The encounters with the administrator and Detective Miller had left a toxic residue in her mind, a creeping paranoia that her selfless act was being systematically reframed as a crime. She was about to find out just how deep the conspiracy of mediocrity went. He arrived without warning. Not a doctor, not a cop. Agent Thompson of the Secret Service. He filled the doorway, his suit perfectly tailored, his posture ramrod straight, radiating an aura of disciplined, simmering fury that was far more intimidating than Miller's world-weary cynicism. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and his gaze was as hard and unforgiving as granite. "Miss Rivas," he said. It was not a question. He entered the room, closing the door behind him with a soft, definitive click. "I'm here to conduct a formal debriefing for the federal after-action report." He made it sound like a routine procedure, but the look in his eyes promised an execution. He didn't sit. He stood at the foot of her bed, looking down at her, a clear and deliberate assertion of dominance. "Let's walk through your decision-making process," he began, his voice a low, controlled monotone. "At precisely 21:47, you were recorded on internal surveillance leaving your designated post, Sector Gamma. At what point did you decide that your personal assessment of the tactical situation superseded the operational plan of a federal protection detail?" The question was a trap, a labyrinth of professional jargon designed to make her look incompetent no matter how she answered. "I saw the gunman," Maya said, her voice steadier than she expected. "He had a clear shot. Your team was still reacting to the breach at the main entrance. He was going to kill the ambassador." "You assessed that he had a clear shot," Thompson corrected, his voice dangerously soft. "You assessed that my team was not reacting appropriately. Were you aware of Secret Service Protocol 7A3 regarding civilian contractors? Specifically, the section on maintaining designated static positions during a Code Red event to avoid crossfire and operational interference?" "I was aware that a man was about to be shot." A muscle twitched in Thompson's jaw. "When you charged the principal's position from the east flank, you collapsed the defensive perimeter. The shooter could have had an accomplice. A second shooter could have used the chaos you created to target my agents, or even other civilians. Your action created a tactical vulnerability that my team then had to account for, while also neutralizing the primary threat and securing the principal. Do you have any comprehension of the level of jeopardy you introduced into a volatile situation? His words were like bullets, each one aimed at the heart of her confidence. He was painting a picture of her as a chaotic, destructive force. There was no accomplice, she countered, her own anger beginning to smolder. There was one man with one gun pointed at the ambassador, and you were too slow. The truth of it hung in the air between them, stark and undeniable. His face, for a fraction of a second, lost its professional mask, revealing a flash of raw, wounded pride. That was what this was about. She hadn't just saved a diplomat, she had exposed a flaw in his perfect, impenetrable machine. She had made him look bad. My team had the threat contained, he snarled, his control finally cracking. We were 2 seconds from neutralization. You got lucky. Your luck doesn't make it the right call. It makes it a reckless gamble that happened to pay off for you. You got your picture in the paper. My team has to spend the next 6 months in hearings answering for why a civilian contractor felt the need to intervene on our watch. He took a deep breath, visibly composing himself, the mask of professional detachment sliding back into place. My official report will reflect the facts. It will classify your actions as a non-sanctioned civilian engagement resulting in a compromised security perimeter and interference with a federal protective detail. That is all. He turned on his heel and walked out, the click of the door sealing her fate. The conversation left her feeling hollowed out, as if he'd surgically removed any last vestige of pride she had. The system wasn't just indifferent, it was actively hostile, and it had a powerful champion in Agent Thompson. His report, she knew, would be a death sentence for her career. The next blow came the following afternoon, not in person, but through the tinny speaker of her bedside phone. It was her regional manager from Blackwood Security, Mr. Hayes. His voice was slick with false concern. Maya? Rick Hayes here. Just calling to see how you're feeling. We've all been very concerned back at the office. I've been better, Rick, she said, the irony thick in her voice. Yes, well, listen, the reason I'm calling. He cleared his throat. We've received the preliminary reports from the federal authorities regarding the incident. And, well, there appear to be some significant issues. What kind of issues? Maya asked, already knowing the answer. It seems there were some protocol violations, he said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. A failure to maintain your post, unauthorized engagement. Look, Maya, you know how at Island. We have to maintain our professional relationships, especially with federal agencies. We have to adhere to industry best practices. Our reputation, our liability, it's all on the line. He was a coward, spouting corporate doublespeak to distance himself and the company from the woman who had just embodied the highest ideal of their profession. What are you saying, Rick? What I'm saying is, until this is all cleared up, we have no choice but to place you on indefinite administrative leave without pay, effective immediately. There it was. The coward's termination. We'll be conducting our own internal review, of course. We wish you the best in your recovery, Maya, and in your future endeavors. He hung up before she could respond. A few hours later, a sterile HR email confirmed her termination for gross negligence and informed her that her company-sponsored health insurance would be discontinued at the end of the month. The company she had bled for had cast her aside to appease Agent Thompson and protect their government contracts. She was jobless, injured, and in less than 2 weeks, she would be uninsured. They discharged her from the hospital 3 days later. The exit was a humiliating ordeal. A nurse handed her a plastic bag with her blood-stained uniform, a bundle of prescriptions she couldn't afford, and a wheelchair ride to the front door, where a cab she paid for with the last of her savings was waiting. Her small, third-floor walk-up apartment felt like a prison. The climb up the stairs left her gasping for breath, her side a bonfire of agony. Then the mail started. It began as a trickle and quickly became a flood. The first envelope was from her now former insurance provider. It wasn't a bill, but an explanation of benefits. It was a document of pure Kafkaesque horror, a spreadsheet of gibberish codes and terrifying numbers. Amount billed, 180, 7, 450, 2.17. Amount covered, 12, 500. And the final, sickening column, patient's responsibility, 174, 950, 2.17. A week later, the official denial letter arrived. It was a masterpiece of legal maneuvering and bureaucratic cruelty. In dense, impenetrable prose, it cited Policy Exclusion Clause 14. C. Injuries sustained during the commission of or exposure to a felonious assault. And Clause 21. B. Injuries resulting from a workplace hazard not covered under the employer's designated liability rider for high-risk engagements. It was nonsense. It was a calculated, soulless strategy to avoid paying for the life she had saved. Then came the bills from City General. They arrived in separate envelopes, a coordinated paper assault from every department that had touched her. A 25-0 bill from the emergency room for a trauma response fee. A 90-0 bill for the surgery, a 4-0 a night bill for the ICU. An itemized list that included $75 for a single Tylenol pill and $250 for a box of tissues. The numbers piled up, one on top of the other, building a mountain of debt so high she couldn't see the top. The phone calls started soon after. At first, they were automated, a cheerful, disembodied voice reminding her of her outstanding balance. Then they became real people, relentlessly polite but firm, from a third-party collection agency. They called in the morning, they called in the evening, they left voicemails. Her phone became an instrument of torture. She stopped answering it altogether. She spent her days at her small kitchen table, the bills spread out before her like a tarot reading of a doomed future. The sheer, crushing weight of it was suffocating. She had walked into that gala, a competent professional, earning a modest living. She had left it a hero. And now, she was being systematically ground into dust, punished for that heroism in the most mundane, cruel, and American way possible, through paperwork and debt. One evening, unable to sleep because of the pain in her side and the terror in her heart, she turned on the television. It was a cable news show, a panel of talking heads yelling at each other. The topic was the gala shooting. The initial Hero Guard narrative was a distant memory. A man introduced as a national security analyst, a retired FBI agent with a stern face and an air of absolute authority, was speaking. "What people need to understand," he said, leaning into the camera, "is that in a professional protection detail, the greatest variable is the untrained amateur. This guard, however well-intentioned, became a liability. The situation was resolved in spite of her actions, not because of them." Another panelist, a journalist, chimed in. "And I'm hearing from sources close to the investigation that the official report confirms she broke protocol and directly interfered with federal agents. It's a miracle no one else was hurt." Thompson's poison had seeped into the bloodstream of the media. His narrative was now the accepted truth. She went online, a masochistic impulse driving her to see the full extent of the damage. Anonymous comments on news articles called her a glory hound, a reckless idiot who got what she deserved, a wannabe cop who should be in jail. She clicked the power button, plunging the room into darkness. Her reflection stared back at her from the blank screen, a pale, tired face, haunted by pain and disbelief. She was utterly alone. Jobless, disgraced, in constant pain, and buried under a mountain of debt that would shadow her for the rest of her life. She had put her body on the line to protect another human being, and the system, in all its grinding, impersonal cruelty, had responded by dismantling her own life, piece by piece, until there was almost nothing left. The weeks that followed her discharge blurred into a monotonous cycle of pain, poverty, and soul-crushing despair. Her world shrank to the four walls of her small apartment, a space that felt less like a home and more like a holding cell. The air grew stale, thick with the scent of dust and hopelessness. The only sound was the incessant, maddening drip, drip, drip of a leaky faucet in the kitchen sink, each drop a tiny hammer striking the anvil of her sanity. Her days were formless. She'd wake late, her body stiff, the deep, pulling ache in her side a constant companion. It was a cruel memento, a physical manifestation of her ruin. The hospital had given her a sheet of paper with physical therapy exercises, but the movements were agonizing, and without a professional to guide her, she was afraid of doing more harm than good. Her recovery had not just stalled, it was regressing. A simple trip to the corner store for bread and canned soup left her winded and trembling, her hand pressed against the tender scar tissue. The pile of white envelopes on her kitchen table grew into a malevolent mountain. She stopped opening them. She knew what they were. Demands, threats, numbers with too many zeros. They were monuments to her failure, testaments to the price of a good deed. Sometimes, she would just sit and stare at the pile, feeling its physical weight press down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. The phone remained unplugged. The The silence was better than the synthesized cheerfulness of the debt collectors. In the quiet, her mind would drift back to her time in the army. She'd been a medic in a forward operating base in a dusty, forgotten corner of the world. Life there was hard, dangerous, and stripped to its essentials, but it had a brutal clarity that she now desperately missed. When a soldier was hit, you ran to them. You stopped the bleeding. You saved their life. Your actions had immediate, unambiguous meaning. Your team had your back. You were valued. No one ever handed a wounded soldier a bill for the morphine or the medevac flight. Was that what had made her so naive? Had her military service programmed her with a bug, a fatal flaw of instinctual duty that the civilian world was now ruthlessly punishing her for? The thought was a bitter poison. She had always been proud of her instincts, of her ability to stay calm and act under pressure. Now, she saw that instinct as a curse. It had cost her everything: her health, her career, her financial stability, her name. She felt foolish. Utterly, completely foolish. One afternoon, as the gray city light filtered through her grimy window, she saw a news segment about Ambassador Tanaka. He was in Tokyo, speaking at a press conference. He looked healthy, distinguished, and was talking about strengthening economic ties. He was moving on with his life, a life she had saved. And what about her? She was trapped here, in this room, slowly being crushed by the consequences. A wave of bitterness, so intense it made her nauseous, washed over her. This was her rock bottom, a place beyond anger, beyond sadness. It was a hollow, empty space where hope had died. She limped to the couch and curled into a tight ball, wrapping her arms around herself, clutching the aching spot in her side. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from the vast, silent scream of her emotional agony. She closed her eyes. She had saved a man's life, and in return, her own had been effectively ended. She was alone, forgotten, and completely abandoned. She wasn't waiting for a miracle. She was just waiting for it all to be over. The drip from the faucet continued its relentless count, measuring out the seconds of her wasted life. The knock on the door was so soft, she thought she'd imagined it. It wasn't the loud, aggressive bang of a process server or a landlord chasing rent. It was a polite, hesitant tapping. Tap. Tap tap. For a long moment she didn't move, convinced it was a mistake. But then it came again, just as gentle. With a pained groan, she pushed herself off the couch. Every fiber of her being screamed at her not to open it, to pretend she wasn't there. But a flicker of something curiosity, maybe, or just sheer exhaustion from hiding propelled her forward. She shuffled to the door, her hand resting on the chain lock. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice raspy from disuse. "Miss Maya Rivas?" The voice that came through the door was female, accented, and impeccably polite. "My name is Kiko Sato. I am from the Japanese consulate. I am an aide to Ambassador Tanaka. May I have a moment of your time?" Maya's mind went blank. The Japanese consulate? She fumbled with the chain, her fingers clumsy, and pulled the door open. The woman standing in the drab, poorly lit hallway was a vision of composure and elegance. She was dressed in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, her hair in a neat chignon, her expression one of deep, genuine concern. In her hands, she held a simple, beautiful lacquer box. The contrast between her and the peeling paint of the hallway was jarring. As Maya opened the door, Miss Sato performed a small, crisp bow. It was such a simple gesture, but it broke something open inside Maya. In the past weeks, she had been interrogated, dismissed, debited, and disgraced. This was the first sign of pure, unadulterated respect she had been shown since she'd woken up in the hospital. It was so unexpected, it almost brought her to tears. "Please," Miss Sato said softly, her eyes taking in Maya's pale face and the visible pain in her posture. "May I come in?" Numbly, Maya stepped aside and let her pass. Miss Sato's gaze swept over the small apartment, lingering for a fraction of a second on the menacing mountain of bills on the kitchen table. Her expression didn't change, but Maya saw a flicker of profound sadness, of understanding, in her eyes. "Miss Rivas," she began, turning back to face her. "First, please allow me to express the ambassador's deepest, most sincere apologies for this intrusion, and for the unforgivable delay in reaching you." "Delay?" Maya croaked. "Ambassador Tanaka has been trying to contact you since the day after the incident," Miss Sato explained, her voice tight with controlled indignation. "He was informed by the State Department, and I quote, that you had requested privacy to focus on your recovery. He was given official reports that downplayed the severity of your injuries. He sent flowers, of course, but his attempts at personal contact were consistently and politely rebuffed. Maya stared, dumbfounded. Thompson. Miller. The system had actively conspired to keep her isolated, to hide what they were doing to her. The ambassador grew suspicious, Miss Sato continued. The official narrative did not align with what he remembered, with what he saw in your eyes that night. He took the liberty of hiring a private investigator 2 weeks ago. The investigator's report was delivered to him yesterday. She paused, her gaze steady and full of empathy. He learned everything, Miss Rivas, about your termination from Blackwood Security, about the actions of the Secret Service, about the insurance denial, the media campaign against you, and the financial burdens you have been forced to endure. Miss Sato placed the lacquer box on the small coffee table. The ambassador is a man of honor. The shame he feels over how his savior has been treated is profound. In Japan, a debt such as the one he owes you is a matter of the highest personal and national importance. What has happened here is, to us, a profound dishonor, an unacceptable failure, and it is one we intend to correct. She opened the box. Inside, resting on a bed of silk, were several documents and a platinum credit card. On behalf of the government of Japan, Miss Sato said, her voice now imbued with a formal authority, I am here to present you with an official offer. She picked up the first document. First, the matter of the debt. A wire transfer has already been initiated to a third-party escrow account managed by a law firm in this city. It is more than sufficient to clear your entire outstanding medical debt and any associated fees or penalties. The firm's lawyers will be contacting City General Hospital and their collection agencies tomorrow morning. You will not hear from them again. Maya felt her knees go weak. She sank onto the edge of her couch, her head spinning. The mountain on her table, the source of all her terror, was about to be turned to dust. Miss Sato continued, her voice unwavering. Second, your health. Your recovery is incomplete. The ambassador has made arrangements for you to be flown to the University of Tokyo Hospital, one of the finest medical institutions in Asia. A team of specialists in reconstructive surgery and rehabilitative therapy is expecting you. They will oversee the remainder of your recovery for as long as it takes. All costs will, of course, be covered. Tears were now streaming freely down Maya's face, silent, hot tracks of disbelief and overwhelming relief. Third, Miss Sato said, her voice softening, is the matter of your honor. She held up another document, this one with an official seal. Your courage has not gone unnoticed. His Majesty the Emperor of Japan wishes to formally recognize your extraordinary bravery. He will be awarding you the Medal of Honor with Red Ribbon, one of our nation's highest civilian awards for acts of gallantry. The ceremony will be held upon your recovery. Maya couldn't speak. She could only shake her head, the sobs now catching in her throat. All the pain, the humiliation, the despair of the past weeks, it was all being washed away by this quiet, dignified woman and the incredible honor she represented. Miss, Sato gave a small, gentle smile. There is no need to pack much, Miss Rivas. Everything you require will be provided for you. She glanced toward the window, at the gray street below. Maya followed her gaze. Parked at the curb, gleaming even in the dull afternoon light, was a black, immaculate sedan with diplomatic plates. The car is waiting to take us to the airport, Miss Sato said, her voice full of a quiet, unshakable purpose. The jet was sent for you. It is waiting. The words hit Maya with the force of a physical blow, but a healing one. A jet for her. The sheer scale of the gesture was staggering. It wasn't just a rescue, it was a statement. It was a rebuke to everyone who had abandoned and vilified her. It was the ultimate vindication. In her darkest hour, when her own country had thrown her away, another nation had crossed the globe to claim her as their hero. The journey was a blur of surreal comfort. The silent, smooth ride in the black sedan. The discreet entrance to a private air terminal, bypassing the noise and chaos of the public airport. And then, the sight of it on the tarmac. A sleek Gulfstream jet, its engines humming softly, a flight attendant waiting at the bottom of the stairs with a warm smile. This was a world Maya never knew existed, and she was its honored guest. The flight itself was the antithesis of her life for the past month. It was quiet, serene. She was treated not as a liability or a number on an invoice, but with a gentle, profound respect that was more healing than any medicine. Her recovery in Tokyo was just as transformative. Her room at the university hospital overlooked a tranquil Japanese garden, a world away from the cracked ceiling and grimy window of her apartment. The doctors were brilliant, the nurses attentive. They spoke to her with kindness, explaining every procedure, focusing not on the cost, but solely on her well-being. With the help of a dedicated physical therapist, she began to reclaim her body, her first pain-free steps feeling like a monumental victory. The ceremony took place 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day. Maya stood tall in the Akasaka Palace, dressed not in a uniform or hospital gown, but in a simple, elegant dress Miss Sato had helped her choose. The scar on her side was now a faint silver memory, a reminder of a debt that had been repaid in full. Ambassador Tanaka stood beside her, his face alight with genuine warmth and friendship. As a high-ranking official pinned the beautiful red-ribboned medal to her dress, the room filled with the sound of flashing cameras. The story became an international sensation, a tale of honor and disgrace. It was a source of quiet but significant embarrassment for the U.S. State Department. Agent Thompson was reassigned to a dreary desk job. Blackwood Security lost its lucrative contract for the Astoria Hotel. The pundits who had derided her on television fell silent. But for Maya, none of that mattered. She wasn't bitter. Standing there, the medal heavy on her chest, she was at peace. She had learned a hard, painful lesson about the world, that institutions are often heartless and systems are built to protect themselves. But she had also learned that honor was not a concept found in a policy manual or an official report. It was a debt held in the human heart, and for those who understood its value, it was worth more than anything. She had found her vindication not in the validation of the country she was from, but in the profound gratitude of the one that had come to bring her home.